Paris, the city of light, le 75, and the reason you came to this video, the city of love. Love it or hate it, many people consider Paris to be the most romantic city in the world. In this video, I'm going to break down the most romantic things to do in the city. And don't worry, because if you're on a budget, there's plenty of free and budget activities sprinkled in, so it definitely won't break the bank. If you're new here, then hi, I'm Sophie. I've been writing about Paris since 2015. I lived there for several years, and as of September 2022, I'm married to a local. So you could say I'm a bit of an expert in the city. So without further ado, let's dive into the best things to do in Paris. The first is my personal favourite, and that's to discover the beautiful district that is Montmartre. Now, if you've never heard of this area of Paris before, it's essentially the highest point of Paris and it's a slice of heaven in the 18th arrondissement. This area is set high above the rest of the city and feels completely different from everywhere else, and that's for good reason. It actually didn't become a part of Paris proper until 1860. Prior to this, it was farmland, and it has retained a bit of this village vibe to this day. There are a myriad of things to do, and you could easily spend half a day wandering around the district and allowing it to reveal itself to you. However, I will point out a few things that I think that you would really enjoy. The first is definitely not my personal favourite, but that is to discover the I love you wall. Now, this wall could be said to be romantic because it says I love you in over 300 languages, but I think it's kind of ugly, personally. Otherwise, do wander around the Sacré-Cœur, but once you're done there, don't forget to head to these quieter and more secluded streets of Montmartre. That includes discovering La Maison Rose, which has an outdoor dining area in front of one of the cutest bistros in Paris, seeing the Montmartre vineyard, because yes, there are still vineyards in Paris, though the Montmartre vineyard was only created in the 1930s on the site of a former refuse in order to stop developers from coming in and turning it into a building site. Unfortunately, the vineyard is closed for most of the year, but it can be admired from its exterior. I also personally really love the Musée de Montmartre, which is a little house museum that was the former atelier of Renoir and houses a small museum with lots of beautiful paintings, a cafe with views onto the Sacré-Cœur, and just a really beautiful garden that makes you forget that you're in the heart of Paris. The next thing I would do is head to a cafe. Now, this might be cliche because Paris is home to quite literally hundreds of cafes, but if you're in search of something special, then there are a lot of specialty coffee shops as of the past 10 years or so. So if you want to have something very romantic, then I recommend just going to a cafe, getting a coffee to go, and strolling around the city. And while I'm on that point, I do recommend going on a walk along the Seine. Now, I know this isn't the most thrilling idea, but I think that you'll find the architecture around is rather inspiring. Not only that, but there are 3 islands of the Seine that you can explore. If you want to learn more about them, then you can check out our video, which I'll link here. To be honest, I personally love wandering down the quays and exploring all of the monuments from eye level. If you didn't know how Paris is laid out, essentially you can see most of the major attractions from along the Seine. This includes Notre Dame, the Eiffel Tower, the Musée d'Orsay, which is a former train station turned museum, and a lot of other beautiful attractions. In the summer months, if you're visiting, then one of the most popular things to do is head down onto the quays and sit along the Seine and have a really gorgeous picnic. I personally love picnicking on Square du Vert Galant on Ile de la Cité. There's a lovely weeping willow tree there and it's just very peaceful. And while we're on the subject of major monuments, I would say that the Eiffel Tower is definitely very underrated when it comes to romance. In fact, seeing the Eiffel Tower sparkle is one of those things that you definitely can't miss in Paris, but I think a lot of people overlook it because it's obviously very touristy. However, it's completely free. Basically, on the hour, every hour, from around 7 p.m, earlier in the winter, later in the summer, until around midnight, though this changes depending on the time of the year, the Eiffel Tower will sparkle for 5 minutes, and you can see the Eiffel Tower from so many different areas in Paris. If you want to splash out a little bit, then you can even book a hotel room with an Eiffel Tower view. I've never been fortunate enough to do this, but it's definitely something that's on my bucket list. Another thing that's related to the Seine that I don't think gets talked about enough because it's, again, very touristy, is going on a river cruise. I personally went on a river cruise with my husband a few years ago, and it was honestly a really, really gorgeous experience. Essentially, we paid around €100 per person to go on a 3-course dinner cruise. So we set off on a pontoon from just by the Eiffel Tower, and then we were ferried all the way up the river to around where Gare de Lyon is in the 12th arrondissement. We saw lots of monuments en route, and we just really enjoyed soaking up the sights, enjoying seeing the Seine lit up at night. Of course, you can't go wrong by dining in a restaurant. There are a number of things at all kinds of different price points, so don't worry if you don't want to splurge out on a Michelin star, though that is of course a possibility. Actually, it's worth noting that over 30% of eateries in Paris are street food, so it's not hard to find something on a budget. Another popular way of trying French food is by heading to a bouillon. Now, this is essentially a huge dining area that is full of waiters in traditional attire and fancy tablecloths. You can probably eat for around 15 to 20 euro per person. It's not the best quality of food, but the portions are huge and it's a really amazing experience that you'll remember for years to come. For a really cozy dining experience, I really recommend going to Le Bistrot d'Henri. There are just a few things on the menu and only around 20 covers, but it's a traditional French bistro which has the ambiance of a cafe, I imagine, from the 50s. If you're looking for a fancier experience, then I recently went to Le Train Bleu. You can check out my video, but it's essentially a very beautiful dining hall from the early 1900s, and there's lots of fine dining French things on the menu. Another option, if you don't want to go for dinner just yet, is to head to a wine bar. There are hundreds of trendy and cozy wine bars in Paris that are worth visiting, and there's nothing more romantic than conversing over a glass of fine French wine as you watch the world go by while sitting on an outdoor terrace seating. As of a few years ago, unfortunately, the terraces of Paris are no longer heated, and so in the winter, I do recommend going indoors. A few French wine bars will require that you reserve ahead of time, so do be sure to do that to avoid disappointment. If you're heading to Paris in late spring, summer, early fall, then you're in a lot better luck because there's so much more seating because you'll be able to sit outside without freezing. Another thing that you could do is go to a museum. Paris has over 150 museums, and around a dozen of these are free. Some of my favorite small museums that you do have to pay for, but I think are worth the entry cost, include the Orangery, where you can see Monet's famed water lilies, the Rodin Museum, which is in the 7th arrondissement and is in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower, so it's really gorgeous and you can enjoy all of Rodin's sculptures. Another museum that is perfect for the young at heart is the Fairground Museum. This is in the 12th arrondissement and is essentially lots of old fairground rides. There are so many different things, and you can go on an old carousel, you can play old games. It's just a really fun experience, and I personally went with friends, but I do think it would be a cute date idea. Hip, trendy and cool. The Canal St Martin is in the 10th arrondissement of the city and is essentially a 19th century canal which is lined with lots of boutiques, bars and restaurants. It's popular all year round, but it's especially popular with locals in the summer who choose to hang out there to have their picnics or dine at one of the many bars spilling out onto the streets. There are so many different kinds of cuisine in this area, and I really recommend visiting at least once. If you go in the morning, then you can head to Du Pain et des Idées, which is one of the best bakeries in Paris and is so successful that it only needs to open from Monday to Friday. The best thing to get there is the escargot, which is a swirly pastry that is so delicious. If you head there in the evening, then you'll have your pick of the bars and restaurants to choose from. And if you made it all the way to the end of the video, then thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more travel tips. See you next time!